Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Halo teman-teman, jumpa lagi di Aryan M Channel. Oke, buat teman-teman yang klik video ini, saya harapkan mudah-mudahan teman-teman masih dalam kondisi sehat walafiat. Baik, di kesempatan kali ini saya akan coba ajak teman-teman untuk melihat sebuah video dengan judul Bahasa Indonesia adalah bahasa yang paling mudah dipelajari. Yang paling mudah dipelajari. Ini ungkapan dari orang luar ini teman-teman ya. Dan seperti apa videonya, kenapa demikian dikatakan bahasa Indonesia bahasa di dunia yang paling mudah dipelajari. Silakan teman-teman simak dan silakan juga teman-teman bisa berkomentar. Tapi jangan lupa like dan subscribe.
So it turns out I have to take a language credit in university. So I'm going to take the easiest language in the world. Good day, everyone. One of the most common questions about language learning is, what is the easiest language to learn? Now, there is no exact answer to that question that applies to everyone because it depends on a few different factors. So the factors it depends on are your native language, any other languages you happen to have learned, and also the complexity of the language in question. So if your native language is English, then the easiest language for you is probably the one that's the most similar to English. And if it's not, then maybe you've learned another language. Like if you've learned French, then maybe the language that's easiest for you to learn is the one that's most similar to French, because you've already learned a lot of the concepts of those that those languages have in common. So you've already done a lot of the work in the past already. Okay, so it could be your native language, the one that's closest to your native language, closest to other languages you've learned, and it also, another factor is the complexity of that language. So it could be a language that's similar to your own, but if that language happens to be quite complex, then maybe that's not the easiest one. So it's kind of a balance of those different factors. There's no precise formula, but we have an idea just from those factors. Now, the American Foreign Service Institute that trains American diplomats to go overseas, well, it trains them in language skills before their placement overseas. They've done a lot of research into this topic as it relates to English speakers, because they're training their American staff to go abroad. So they're English speakers, but they're learning other languages. So they have a lot of data about how many hours it takes, about how intensively they have to study these different groups of languages. So they have it categorized into 4 different groups. There's category 1, which are the easiest languages to learn for native English speakers. Then they've got 2, 3, 4, and then 5 is the group of most difficult languages to learn.
Bahasa Inggris ini termasuk yang sulit ya katanya.
For I believe 88 weeks full time. So that's like 88 weeks, I guess a year and a half.
Inggris like termasuk yang sulit.
People who study the category 1 languages, I think, are in there for 23 or 24 weeks full time. So it's almost times 4 if you learn a level 5 language. So which ones are in level 1, the easiest category? They are the Germanic languages such as Dutch, Afrikaans, the Northern Germanic languages from Scandinavia like Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish. Not Finnish, that's a separate language group. And then you've got the Romance languages like French and Spanish and Italian and Portuguese, and I believe also Romanian is in there. So those ones are the most closely related to English. You've got the Germanic ones like Dutch and Afrikaans, and I think those are probably the most closely related to English and the easiest to learn. I haven't actually studied those personally, but a lot of people say that Dutch is the easiest for English speakers. I have studied French, and French has been the easiest language that I have personally studied. I used to think it was Indonesian because Indonesian is really simple and really straightforward, and I made really fast progress in it, and I could communicate in Indonesian after studying for just a couple of months before a trip. But when I started to study French, I realized how much of an advantage that shared vocabulary is, because English vocabulary is something like 35% French. So when I would look at a French text, I would recognize a lot of the key words already, and I could basically understand half of the text without ever having studied French. So after a few weeks, I could basically read, and after a few months, I could communicate and speak, not fluently, but I could make myself understood, and I could understand pretty much whatever was said to me face to face, at least, not on the radio, not third person, but face to face, I could understand. So French has been definitely the easiest one for me. Category 2, by the way, consists of only German. German is a Germanic language, just like Dutch or Afrikaans, and it's closely related to English, but it's also quite complex grammatically. It's not that complicated from what I hear, but it does have some complications like grammatical case endings that other Germanic languages don't have, and that's why it's not in Category 1. It's a little bit more complex than the Category 1 languages. That puts it in Category 2, and I believe it's the only language in Category 2, so it's kind of off on its own because it's related to English, but a little bit
Lebih rumit bahasa
the
Inggris.
hardest has been Japanese.
Yang
by
paling
far.
sulit adalah bahasa
And
Jepang.
that's one of the Category 5 languages according to the Foreign Service
yeah.
Institute. Now what makes Japanese so hard is, first of all, the grammar is very different from English. It's about as different as you can get. And also the writing system is extremely complex. And I think that the FSI categorization of level 5 doesn't even take into account the writing system. It's just the spoken language. It matches my experience with French versus Japanese. It feels to me like it took about 5 times as long to get conversant in Japanese as it did with French. About 5 times as long.
Paling sulit bahasa
But then the
Jepang.
writing system on top of that takes a lot longer than that. Maybe 10 times or 20 times or 30 times as long as it takes to learn to read French, to read and write French, because you're learning 4 different writing systems and combining them together. You're learning ideographic pictures. Those are the Chinese characters, kanji. Those are very complicated. There's 2,000 of them that you need just to read a book comfortably, and they're read in different ways. There's different pronunciations for each one. So learning Japanese is a real long-term intensive thing. So it's been the hardest for me. Second to that would be Arabic, because when you learn Arabic, you're learning not only one language. You're learning the formal language, which is kind of outdated and archaic language, but then you have to learn a dialect at the same time, and then you have to learn how to communicate with speakers of other dialects. So,
Oke teman-teman, ya demikian ya. Kenapa bahasa Indonesia, bahasa di dunia yang paling mudah dipelajari? Hal ini karena kesederhanaan dari bahasa Indonesia itu yang paling yang paling mudah untuk bisa dipelajari, karena dilihat dari segi penulisannya dan pengucapannya, bahasa Indonesia ini sangat sederhana sekali ya. Bagaimana melihat bahasa Indonesia untuk dipelajari. Dan memang benar teman-teman ya, dalam bahasa Indonesia baik ejaannya ataupun tulisannya ataupun ucapannya itu sama teman-teman ya. Kalau A dibaca A, misalkan dieja J sama A juga bacanya hanya J. Jadi sesuai dengan tulisan ya, jadi gampang untuk diucapkan. Oke teman-teman, demikian ya mengapa bahasa Indonesia bahasa yang paling mudah dipelajari. Oke, terima kasih, sampai jumpa lagi di video berikutnya, dan jangan lupa like dan subscribe.